Thank you very much, Helen, and I think it's been a really great way to start tonight's event with that super film and with those good opening remarks from Helen. And I'd like to thank Helen and Barbara and the wider Yes Clydesdale team for organising this event, which is important because oftentimes women have expressed a real desire to get to the nuts and bolts about the arguments for a yes vote and for the referendum in September. So I think it's brilliant to see so many women here tonight, united by the desire to ensure that we can all make an informed decision on September the 18th. And we have run and participated in many similar events right across Clydesdale, and I've participated in some similar events right across Scotland. And what is the most useful thing about these events is the opportunity to engage, to discuss, and for you to have the opportunity to ask your questions, either by raising your hand or, as Helen said, by writing down your thoughts and opinions and views on the bits of paper on your table. Now, all of us in this panel this evening, we want to secure a yes vote, and we want to share with you our reasons for this and why we think it would be a positive decision for Scotland. And as women, as over half the population, our views and our opinions are important, so I do look forward to hearing some of your thoughts later on this evening. Now, I think it's a really exciting time for Scotland because never before has such attention been focused on our country. It's a time when we can dare to imagine the type of country we want to create, and also, though, the type of country we want for our children to grow up in and for future generations to come. For me, the reasons I believe independence are important is because we will be firmly in control of our destiny and our own decisions. Now, the strapline of the Yes campaign is that the people best placed to make decisions about Scotland are those that care most about it. That is, the people who live and work here. It makes sense, therefore, for independence to be the option that we choose because it's democratically going to be the case that we will always get the government that we vote for. Now, because for most of my life, Scotland hasn't been governed by the people and the parties that they have elected. Now, I was born in 1980, right at the very start of Margaret Thatcher's premiership. Now, we know, all of us know, the untold damage that her administration did to Scotland, and in particularly this part of Scotland, the industrial heartlands of Lanarkshire. And we also know that it was her administration, the one that Scotland didn't elect, that piloted the poll tax on Scotland a year before the rest of the UK. Now, I remember chatting to my mum chatting to a friend and her asking her after her grown-up daughter, and her reply was that she had moved to England and so was pleased to have a year escaping from the poll tax. Now, at that time I was only 8, but I remember thinking that it was a really odd thing. You know, why was Scotland being treated unfairly, and why was it being treated so differently? And then, like lots of childhood questions, I never found a satisfactory answer to either of those. So 7 years later, at 15, having lived my whole life under Thatcher's Tories, I joined the Yes campaign by becoming a member of the SNP. Now, since then, though, there have been moments of hope along the way. On the 3rd of May 1997, I remember walking to school with a smile on my face and feeling optimistic. Tony Blair's Labour Party brought 18 years of Tory rule to an end, ushering in a new era of fairness, or so I hoped. Because the following summer, I went to university, and I was part of the first intake of students who ever had to pay for that education. And I thought back to the tune that came to define the 1997 election, "Things can only get better." And I truly struggled to imagine how they could possibly get any worse. And during my time at university, Blair's government ploughed ahead with its policy of shattering all the hope and optimism it had created by its election as it waged its illegal war on Iraq. Now, together with students from the Green Party, the Scottish Socialists, and others with no party political affiliation, we helped to establish the Glasgow University Anti-War Coalition. I'm proud to say that that movement was the fastest growing group on campus, and that we, along with a million others, took to the streets of Glasgow to march against the invasion of Iraq. And I'm only sorry that it seems there is nothing that anyone could have said or done to steer our Westminster rulers away from the warmongering path that seemed to be hell-bent on taking. But now I'm an MSP, and I'm in a very privileged position. I am always very aware of how privileged that position is, of having just a little more influence over the direction that our nation is heading in and the decisions that it takes. And I'm delighted through the Yes campaign to once again have the opportunity to work with other parties and with those with absolutely no political affiliation, just as I did at university. And together we can all share our shared goal of taking Scotland in the right direction. I believe that that right direction is towards independence. Now, at the moment, using the devolved powers that we already have in the Parliament, we have done a great deal to advance our society. The gains of devolution have truly been great. We enjoy, for example, free personal care for the elderly, free prescription charges, and free tuition fees, because we believe that education should be based on the ability to learn and not the ability to pay. And it was one of the most proud moments that I had as an MSP, was being able to re-establish that principle of free education in Scotland. Now, if we contrast that to decisions taken by the Westminster government, which sees England with some of the highest university fees across Europe, and which is steadily embarking upon a programme of privatisation of its NHS, we can see that very different approaches by both governments. Now, these gains of devolution are threatened, I think, with further reductions to the Scottish Government's budgets, and so I believe that we need the protection of independence so that we can always have a government in our country that reflects and pursues the priorities and the principles of our country. And even within my own portfolio as Minister for Children and Young People, I'm relentlessly made aware of the limitations that we have as a government to do the best that we can for our children. Now, as Helen says, we've just passed a groundbreaking and far-reaching Children and Young People Act that sets about transforming lives through streamlining the way services support children and families. It puts early intervention at the heart of the way we deliver services. It aims to significantly increase the entitlement of early learning and childcare to 3- and 4-year-olds and our most vulnerable twos, and it seeks to embed children's rights within legislation. Moreover, we have an array of strategies and policy developments that seek to set Scotland on a path towards Scotland becoming the best place in the world to grow up. However, much of the work that we undertake is being undone, often by the regressive nature of the welfare reform programme. Now, those reforms stand to push up to 100,000 children into poverty. Those aren't the Scottish Government's figures, those are figures produced by the Child Poverty Action Group. And that's not, I don't think, the kind of country that any of us want to be part of. If we had the powers and if we had the levers at our disposal, we could create a much more fairer and much more equal country. Instead, what we need to do with the powers that we have is to mitigate the worst impacts of decisions that have been taken elsewhere. Take, for example, the bedroom tax, a policy that was conceived by Labour, implemented by the coalition, that penalises the most vulnerable simply for having an additional room in their house, in their home, actually. These are people's homes we're talking about as well, and it was designed to help sort a housing pressure in parts of London. Now, around 90% of Scottish MPs voted against it, and yet it's still imposed on Scotland against our will. And that's not democracy, and what it means is that John Swinney, who's the man who's in charge of Scotland's budget, needs to divert resources away from elsewhere to alleviate its impact and to protect those that are worst affected. Now, we can afford to do things differently. We are a resource-rich country. We have a talented population. We have a well-educated population, and as a country, we boast some of the best universities in the world. And in each of the last 32 years, we have contributed more per head of population than the rest of the UK as a whole. Yet, for some unfathomable reason, the No campaign thinks Scotland is unable to run its own affairs, or, as some politicians have put it, not genetically programmed to take political decisions. Or even worse, as another politician stated, that we shouldn't run our own welfare system. Now, colleagues, with our resources and our potential, I don't believe Scotland is uniquely incapable of running its own affairs. And later this year, we'll be welcoming the world to compete in the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow. Countries all with their own independence and competently and confidently running their own countries. And what a pleasure it would be to join that family of nations and to be a positive voice for good and peace on the international stage. Independence offers us an opportunity and the chance to create a different future. But what are those opportunities? Well, in Scotland's future, we have set out our prospectus and our vision for what we can do with independence, and it's the most comprehensive blueprint for a new independent country that has been ever produced. And I would urge you to read it. Maybe not all of it. It's about 650 pages. We've got 650 questions, but simply take the opportunity to delve into bits that are most relevant to you. We've set out within it ambitions to abolish the bedroom tax, to protect the NHS, to transform childcare and to get rid of illegal weapons of mass destruction from the Clyde. We also want young people to have opportunities to work and flourish in a country that is re-industrialised, and we want to take our rightful place on the world stage. These are the opportunities presented through independence: a fairer, equal, socially just and successful country, a country that cares for its citizens and is a good international neighbour. That is the future that I want to create, and it can happen if we choose to vote yes in September. The alternative is to keep softening the blows of our aggressive government that we didn't elect, to harbour weapons of mass destruction and to have 100,000 children pushed into poverty. A no vote isn't a vote for the status quo, but most definitely a yes vote puts our future in our own hands. So I look forward this evening to getting a chance to discuss further some of the topics that may be of relevance and of interest to you, because this is an opportunity that I think we should grasp. And I think it's events like these that are going to be the determining factor as to whether or not we get that opportunity to create the country that we seek. So thank you, and I look forward to hearing